Welcome back to ABA Chapter Chat.
Great to be here.
Today we're taking a deep dive into Chapter 13 of Applied Behavior Analysis for Teachers, which is titled Putting It All Together.
Yeah, this one's key.
Now, we've talked about lots of individual ABA tools before, right? And this chapter is really about how all those pieces kind of fit together.
Exactly, how they create classrooms that are effective and, actually enjoyable places to be for both the kids and the teachers.
That enjoyable part is so important. So think of it less like isolated techniques and more seeing the whole picture.
That's a great way to put it. It's moving from, say, knowing the ingredients to actually baking the cake. This chapter shows how, careful planning and really understanding how the environment, the rules, even the teacher's style, it all works together based on ABA principles.
Okay. So our goal today is basically to unpack the core ideas here, make it super clear, give you some practical takeaways you can actually use.
Right.
We're looking at how setting up your classroom, your instruction.
Yeah.
It's not just about managing behavior. It's about creating a space where learning can really, thrive.
Mm-hmm.
And it all starts, or so the chapter tells us, even before the students walk in the door. It starts with planning and preparation.
Absolutely. The chapter really emphasizes that. A well-thought-out classroom environment, it can proactively support learning and actually prevent a lot of those disruptive behaviors.
The ones that eat up so much instructional time.
Exactly. It's like having a map before you start a journey, right? It just makes the whole process much smoother.
Totally makes sense. I mean, if you've spent time thinking about your lessons, the materials, even just how the chairs are arranged, you're going to be much better prepared for, whatever the day throws at you.
Although, as the chapter kind of playfully points out, kids will always keep us on our toes.
Oh, definitely. You know that moment? Wait, have you ever seen anyone do that before? Every teacher knows that feeling.
Yeah.
And this brings us really nicely into a key concept: stimulus control.
Okay, stimulus control. What's fascinating here is how the chapter explains this specifically in the context of a classroom.
Right.
Simply put, it's how different things, different elements in the environment can influence a student's behavior. They act as signals.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit more. So, imagine a student who often gets chatty during independent work time. But they're pretty focused during group activities. The independent work setting itself, that situation, might have become a signal, what we call an SD, a discriminative stimulus,
right,
that suggests talking is likely to happen, maybe because there's less direct teacher focus then or something.
Exactly. And the chapter then introduces this really powerful idea.
Yeah.
We can intentionally design our classrooms to set up new signals, new SDs, for appropriate behavior.
Okay, so we're actively shaping the environment to cue the behavior we want.
Precisely. And it breaks this down into 4 main ways we can add structure to do this. 4 kinds of structure.
All right, let's dive into those structures. The first one is the physical arrangement of the classroom. Now, this isn't just about, making the room look pretty, is it?
No, not at all. I mean, aesthetics matter, but this is more functional. The chapter highlights how the physical layout itself sends messages to students about what's expected.
How so?
Well, for example, if a teacher can easily see all the students from wherever they usually stand or sit, that visual presence can act as a cue for students to stay on task.
Okay, makes sense.
And similarly, just having enough space between desks can actually prevent some of those off-task interactions or distractions.
Right. And they give some really practical examples in the book, like having specific areas for different activities, a quiet reading corner versus maybe a noisier space for group projects. That helps students understand what kind of behavior fits in each zone. They even mention things like study carols for students who get easily distracted.
Yeah, or seating certain kids closer to the teacher.
It makes you think about how the room itself is constantly communicating expectations, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. And what's insightful is how the chapter considers different student needs. A visually stimulating classroom with bulletin boards, student work, that's great for many kids.
Sure.
But for some students, maybe those with significant disabilities like autism, a more neutral, less distracting environment might actually be more supportive for learning.
That's a really important point. It's not one size fits all.
Not at all. And then there's just the simple act of keeping the classroom neat and organized. A cluttered space can be visually overwhelming, maybe even make it harder for students to find things or move around easily.
Yeah, basic stuff, but it matters for stimulus control. And the chapter also points out that consistency is important, right? If you keep changing the room arrangement around without clear communication,
Right. It can weaken those behavioral cues you've worked so hard to establish. If the reading corner suddenly becomes the math center overnight, that's confusing.
Okay, so physical structure is one. What's the second type?
The second is time structure, how the schedule, the flow of the day, acts as a signal.
Ah, the schedule. So, predictability.
Precisely. A predictable daily routine helps students know what to expect and when. Posting schedules for the whole class or even individual task schedules for some students.
Especially helpful for students with autism, they mentioned.
Definitely. It can provide a lot of reassurance and reduce anxiety about what's coming next. They know the rhythm of the day.
And the chapter talks about using timers too, doesn't it? Like visual timers or even just a kitchen timer.
Yeah, as specific SDs. Cues for starting or ending independent work, signaling transitions between subjects. The timer basically becomes the signal to shift gears.
Makes sense.
But, and this is a key takeaway here, just having a schedule isn't enough. The activities within that schedule need to be engaging and meaningful.
Right, you can have a perfect schedule full of boring stuff.
Exactly. The chapter touches on maximizing instructional time, making sure students are actively learning. They have that slightly funny example, remember? The first grade teacher using flashcards for restroom access during a break.
Oh, yeah. A bit extreme, maybe, but it drives home the point about trying to make every moment count for learning.
Right. Trying to avoid that bedtime.
Okay, so physical structure, time structure. What's number 3?
Number 3 is instructional structure. This is about how our lessons themselves are organized.
Okay, and the chapter connects this back to having clear learning goals and objectives, right, which we talked about way back in chapter 3.
Yep, it all builds a well-structured lesson plan, outlining what you want students to learn, what you'll do, what they'll do, the materials needed, how you'll check for understanding it, provides a clear roadmap for learning.
But it's not just about having the plan written down, is it? It's also how we deliver the instruction.
Absolutely. The chapter emphasizes the importance of, enthusiastic and brisk teaching, keeping the pace moving, keeping students actively involved.
And just asking, does everyone understand at the end?
Definitely not. That rarely tells you much. The chapter highlights the value of active student responding and getting students to actively do something. Tell you something, show you something, find it, draw it, build it.
So you actually see the learning happening.
Exactly. It gives you much better real-time information. And it also touches on an interesting point. Sometimes traditional materials, like maybe just a worksheet for certain kids, might unintentionally become cues for off-task behavior.
Yeah.
Which leads into the idea of offering information and activities in multiple ways, that universal design for learning approach, different modalities.
Gotcha. Okay. Physical, time, instructional. What's the fourth structure?
The fourth is verbal structure, which is essentially all about classroom rules.
Okay, rules. Now, every classroom has rules, right? Even if they're not written down, there are unstated expectations.
Totally. But making those expectations clear and explicit is so important. And the chapter outlines 3 key things that make classroom rules really effective.
What are they?
They should be specific, there shouldn't be too many of them, that's economy, and they need to have clear consequences tied to them.
Okay, let's break those down. Specificity first. That means rules should describe exactly what behavior you want to see.
Yep. So instead of something vague like be respectful, which means different things to different people.
Right.
A specific rule might be listen quietly when others are speaking, or keep your hands and feet to yourself. Observable actions.
And the chapter makes a great point about phrasing rules positively, doesn't it? Focusing on what you want students to do, rather than just a list of don'ts.
Yes, like saying walk in the hallways instead of don't run.
Yeah.
It tells them the desired action.
Okay, that's specificity. Then economy, keeping the number of rules manageable.
Exactly. If you have 20 rules posted, students are probably not going to remember them all. It also makes it harder for the teacher to consistently enforce everything.
Yeah, that makes sense. And they mention sometimes a long list of don'ts can accidentally give kids ideas.
Yeah, that too. Keep it concise. Focus on the most important expectations.
Right. And the third factor was consequences, making sure students understand the link between the rule and what happens next.
Crucial. They need to know what happens if they follow the rules, hopefully, positive reinforcement, and what happens if they don't.
And for students who really struggle with following rules.
For them, the chapter emphasizes needing systematic efforts to teach that connection, using things like visual reminders, verbal prompts, modeling the correct behavior, drawing attention to peers who are following the rule.
And, most importantly,
Consistently reinforcing them when they do follow the rules. catching them being good, making that rule-following behavior pay off for them.
Got it. The chapter also makes a quick distinction between rules and procedures, right?
Yeah, that's useful. Rules are about how we behave in general. Procedures are about how we do specific things in the classroom, like how to turn in homework, how to ask a question, how to line up.
And teaching those procedures explicitly can make things run much more smoothly. Less confusion, less wasted time.
Definitely. Takes the guesswork out of it for students.
Okay, that covers the 4 structures really well. Now let's shift focus just a bit to teacher characteristics. The chapter talks about how effective teachers often become, what's the term, conditioned positive reinforcers.
Right. What's insightful there is that by consistently pairing themselves with positive reinforcement, things like praise, smiles, encouragement, helping students succeed, the teacher themselves becomes associated with those good feelings and positive experiences.
So the teacher becomes someone the students want to be around and work for.
Exactly. And this really pushes back against that old, inaccurate idea that ABA teachers are like cold or robotic.
Yeah, not at all.
It's actually about building positive relationships through these positive interactions. Connection is key.
Totally agree. And the chapter highlights that teachers who understand these ABA principles, they just have a really powerful toolkit. They can design effective management systems that work in all sorts of different classrooms with all kinds of diverse learners.
And to really hammer this home, to show how it all comes together, the chapter gives us a look inside several different hypothetical learning environments. These examples are great.
Yeah, they really bring it to life. We see examples ranging from like an integrated preschool
Yep. Miss Harper's class.
all the way to a self-contained classroom for students with severe disabilities, a resource room, a regular 5th grade class, even school-wide systems in high school.
And community-based instruction, too, Mr. Michaels.
These examples are so helpful for seeing the principles in action. Like in Ms. Harper's preschool, you see the teachers actively using positive social reinforcement, praising kids for sharing, prompting interactions between students with and without disabilities.
Yeah, very intentional. And in Mrs. Mitchell's self-contained class, with students who have severe developmental disabilities, you see how incredibly structured the routines are. They're designed to bring even basic daily living skills, like ticking off a coat or identifying colors, under stimulus control during those routines.
And Mrs. Washington's resource room, that's a clear example of a formal token system, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Students earn points for specific things like being on time, completing work, behaving appropriately.
And then they trade the points for rewards.
Right. But crucially, she's pairing the points with specific verbal praise, too. Great job getting started right away. Here's a point. That pairing is important.
What about Mrs. Samples, the 5th grade teacher? She's interesting because she's portrayed as maybe a bit skeptical of ABA initially.
Right, but when you actually observe her classroom, she's doing so many things that align perfectly with ABA principles, even if she doesn't call it that.
Like what?
Well, she has engaging project-based activities. She uses lots of positive reinforcement. She models helping behavior. She has clear expectations posted as classroom policies. She addresses misbehavior consistently.
So it shows that good teaching often incorporates these principles, sometimes without the formal label.
Exactly. Effective practices are effective practices.
Then there's the section on school-wide positive behavior support, or SWPBS. That highlights a bigger picture, doesn't it?
Yeah, a really important shift towards being proactive and preventative across the entire school. Not just waiting for problems. It talks about those 3 tiers of support.
Primary, secondary, tertiary.
Right. Universal strategies for everyone, targeted group interventions for some, and intensive individual support for a few. All based on understanding why behavior happens to function.
And Mr. Boyd's high school math class, that shows it works with older students too.
Definitely. His team-based learning approach, the clear point system for the teams, his engaging teaching style, consistent routines, it all fits.
And finally, Mrs. Michaels, doing community-based instruction. That seemed like a really powerful example.
Oh, incredibly powerful. Taking students with moderate to severe disabilities out into the community to teach real-world life skills.
Like shopping, using a cafeteria.
Exactly. And you see so many ABA principles packed into that example. The detailed planning beforehand, using visual supports like pictures, task analysis for breaking down skills, positive reinforcement, a token system they're fading out.
And also how they handle challenging behavior proactively and reactively when needed.
Right, including using planned strategies and even safety holds when necessary, unfortunately, but done systematically. It's all about teaching functional skills for adulthood.
Looking across all these examples, you also kind of see the challenges ABA professionals face, right? It's woven in.
Oh, absolutely. Things like, well, addressing the huge range of student needs and abilities you find in any classroom.
Managing challenging behaviors, which can be really tough.
Collaborating effectively with other teachers, parents, administrators, finding the time for that detailed planning and individualized instruction.
Ensuring consistency. That's a big one. Making sure everyone's applying the principles in the same way.
Yeah, and sometimes just getting buy-in or understanding from colleagues who might not be familiar with ABA, dealing with the unexpected because kids are unpredictable.
So true. Okay, as we start to wrap up this deep dive into Chapter 13, what are some of the really useful takeaways for our listeners, the big ideas to hold on to?
Well, I think number one is just the power of being proactive. That planning and structuring your classroom environment, the physical space, the schedule, your lessons, your rules, it makes such a difference.
Yes, setting things up for success from the start.
And really understanding and intentionally using stimulus control, thinking about what signals in your classroom are cueing which behaviors and how you can change those signals.
Definitely. And the piece about rules. Make them specific, keep the list short, and make sure the consequences are clear and consistently applied. That seems essential.
Absolutely. Plus, remembering that you, as the teacher, are a crucial part of that positive environment, becoming that conditioned positive reinforcer by building those positive relationships.
And these examples really drive home that ABA principles aren't just for, one specific type of kid or one kind of classroom. They're flexible, adaptable tools for lots of settings.
And while they didn't always explicitly mention data collection in every single scenario, that underlying idea of observing, seeing what works, and adjusting based on that, that's always there. It's data-based decision-making, even if informal sometimes.
Right. And finally, that focus on teaching functional, real-world skills, especially like in Mrs. Michael's example, preparing students for life beyond the classroom.
That's ultimately what it's all about, isn't it? Creating positive, engaging learning environments benefits everyone. Students learn more, and teachers likely find their jobs more rewarding too.
So wrapping up our discussion on Chapter 13, putting it all together, the core message really seems to be this. Effective teaching using ABA involves thoughtfully and systematically weaving these different principles together. It's not just one trick.
Right. It's about understanding how the environment shapes behavior, setting clear expectations, and using reinforcement strategically to build those skills and create those positive learning spaces.
Here's maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over. Reflect on your own practice, or a classroom you know well. What parts of the structure, the physical setup, the schedule, the rules, the way instruction happens, seem to have the biggest impact on student behavior right now?
Good question. And following that, how could you maybe intentionally tweak one of those things based on what we've talked about today to maybe promote even more learning and engagement? It might be worth revisiting the chapter and really looking closely at those examples again.
We'd definitely love to hear your own experiences and insights. How are you putting it all together in your work? Maybe share your thoughts with colleagues or connect with others online who are thinking about this too.
Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive into ABA Chapter Chat.